Welcome to Communication, Connection, Community, the Podcaster's Podcast. This podcast takes a deep dive into modern-day communication strategies in the podcasting space. We chat with interesting people who make the podcasting and speaking spaces exciting and vibrant. We also dive into the podcasting community with news, updates, latest trends and topics from this ever-evolving space. So strap in. It's going to be one amazing ride. Let's dive into today's episode. And today we are talking about video. I know what you're thinking. This is an audio-only podcast. Why are we talking about video? It's not that I don't want to talk about video. It's not even that I don't want a video podcast or a video version of this podcast. I have spent most of my career, my adult life, in the audio space, former broadcaster. So I'm very comfortable with audio and I have developed a certain comfort with video, but my comfort level really is audio. And in the podcasting space, when you think about it, it started in the audio only space, but it has evolved immensely. Video has evolved a lot since way back in its early days. And we're talking years and years and years that it's evolved. But the audio only podcast has evolved to being video. We now have podcasts that have transcription, all kinds of different elements of the podcast. So we want to talk about video today. But if you're an audio only podcaster, I want you to really garner some of the information we'll be sharing today. And by the way, not being the expert on the video platform, I've, of course, brought in an expert who can talk about video because she spent a lot of time in the video space. Loreta Tarozaite is the founder and CEO of Loreta Today, where she helps technology companies in transition to effectively manage the fast-moving growth stage that comes with business success. With over 20 years of combined experience in broadcast journalism, video storytelling, corporate marketing and communication strategy development, and executive on-camera coaching, Loretta understands the importance of corporate and personal brand storytelling and the impact of connecting with your audience. And video is her forte. Who better to talk about it than Loretta? Loretta, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Carl, for this amazing introduction and for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate that.
And this is probably a shock to you. It's an audio-only podcast.
Yes, I for sure. Exactly. And I for sure, I was rereading your email right before we jumped on the recording, and you did say it's an audio recording, but by default, make sure that it is like by default, I'm thinking it's always, video, like for whatever reason by default, because it's a virtual environment, it's a Zoom environment, and my default thinking is video. So
it's the space you work in as well. And even for, even in the space that we see on TikTok and a lot of other platforms now too, there's Reels, there's Shorts, there's all those other platforms. So even if it's an audio only podcast, a lot of podcasters are also using, Reels and Shorts, which a lot of them are video, right? But anyways, I'm glad you're here. That's the most important part.
Thank you.
You showed up. It's great. It's great to have you on the show today. The biggest pitfalls executives make when speaking on video and how to avoid them. That's the main topic we're going to cover today. But before we dive into that, Loretta, I want to ask you, how did you get into the video space? Just give me a bit of your background.
Yeah, I was a TV news anchor and news reporter back in Lithuania, which is my home country. And that's where my roots are. I started in the journalism environment. I started in the news department specifically. I didn't have a lot of time learning all the backbones of journalism in TV, because we ended up moving here to the United States. But that background and that basis kind of helped me transform the journalism into business storytelling, into executive coaching on camera. When we moved here first, it was 2003, I didn't really know what I will do with all my knowledge, in communications and in broadcasting, because I was not planning to become a news anchor here in the United States. So it took me a while to uncover, how these skills could be transferable to something else, and only through networking, only through people and conversations that I kind of started connecting the dots, and people saying, "Hey, you were in TV, so you should do some video," And I remember, in the beginning, I was like, "Well, what do you mean video?" That was way back 2009, I think, when YouTube was just coming up, and I just didn't have an understanding back then what you should do video meant. That's kind of the transition from being a journalist in television to transforming those skill sets and transferring them to business storytelling and executive, communications through camera as a medium.
2009, YouTube was still in diapers. Like, it was very, very infancy stages for the platform, which has now become this behemoth of a directory for if you want to learn how to bake a cake. You go to YouTube. As a matter of fact,
Yes.
it's become a verb. You just YouTube that, right? It's like Google search, right? You just Google that, right? It's become a household term that we use all the time. Very important though, if not then, certainly now. Yeah, here we are at the recording of this episode in 2024 for executives especially. And when we say executives, let's be clear, it's not executives in corporations. Yes, okay, that's important too. But an executive can be somebody in a company that has 5 or 10 employees, and you and maybe one other person are the top brass. It's very important to make sure you're putting your best face forward every single time that you are speaking, but especially on camera. So let me ask you this. How important is it for executives and CEOs to be putting themselves out there as opposed to just, say, the marketing person or some other representative within the company?
Yes, it is. One of the things that I noticed when we moved here is that the executives, and to your point, not every executive that we talk about is necessarily, a big, large organization's executive, right? But in my mind, back then, it was the large corporation's executive, right? They were hiding behind the walls, right? So which by extension makes the company less human. You don't necessarily understand who these people are that are running the company. Who are these idea generators? Who are these engineers or technologists or whoever, other types of employees that are doing the actual work, that would be worthy sharing those stories about. So the reason why it is important is because it affects, the company, right? If you're out there as an executive visible, if you're establishing your authority online, if you participate in different events, but, you start getting invitations, you start, representing your company, right? So there's more eyeballs on your company because of where you are and how you represent that company. So that is why I see as one of the key things, why executive leadership should consider that. I know everybody has an excuse. I have no time, I have limited time, or I don't want to deal with that. I have to prepare. These excuses do exist for anybody. Like, anybody can find an excuse to not do something. I find a lot of excuses of to not do some things, but just the understanding that in this day and age, especially where we have a lot of AI and AI generated content to begin with, I go back to where my initial mission started, when I realized that these people in those companies are behind the walls. My goal was to help humanize those companies. And for the longest time, that humanization of the companies idea was very difficult to adopt in the industry because it is not something that people think about. But more and more, even in right now, in current age, that becomes just a backbone of how we come across. Are we real? Are we not real? Are people putting, words in our mouths and it's just us as robots? Video, for us is still somewhat of a reality, right? And somebody who worked in that industry or who understands video or who understands human connection can have a flavor that it's still real, right? And that builds that connection,
We've seen some great examples of that humanization capacity over the years. Again, video in its infancy state, not YouTube, but video way back when. And I think bigger companies really latched onto this. Harlan Sanders was the face and the voice of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Dave Thomas, the face and the voice of Wendy's. Steve Jobs, the face and the voice of Apple. We saw that. I don't know at what point we got away from it, or if we did get away from it. We should definitely be moving back in that direction. But what are some of the challenges that executives have when they're getting on camera? What's or maybe what's stopping that? I mean, you said that it's a busy thing. It can be. What are some of the other challenges though that they have?
Yeah, and it is different. It's a different thing for each individual, right? But one of the biggest roadblocks is the fear of being judged, because in the end, it's you on camera. It's nobody else. It's you. So let's give an example of the news. If a politician says something on camera for the news, it's there. It's in the archives forever. Anybody can pull the archives and compare what you said 10 years ago to what you're saying right now if you're continuing to stay in the politics, right? And we have seen that lately in the past several years, right? The conflicting messaging, on the news that we receive. So it's that impression that now it's me. Now people will see my flaws, my tics, my whatever I am about. That's the biggest culprit. Now, if we talk about executive leadership who are in C-suite, right? So no matter what, they have already gone through that training. They have to go through that training, right? Because when you're an executive of a large organization, you represent the company on a completely different level. And you have these teams who train you how to talk, with media, or how to present on stage, or for that matter, on camera, right? But even, in my experience, even those executives sometimes struggle. They come in confident into the studio thinking, oh, I got it. And then they start giving an interview and they realize they didn't get it. so it's still a lot of coaching, just because camera has that a little bit of like, ooh, now it's recorded. Now my word is going to stay forever. People can use it against me. So it's purely fear. Once you bypass that knowledge that it's a recording and it's editable, the goal is not for us to make you look bad unless we're evil, in the organization. But the goal is not to make you bad as an executive. The goal is to make you sound good, look good, and that's why it's a recording. Now, obviously, live, we just talked, in the green room, live versus, recorded message, it's different, right? Slightly different coaching. But that's the biggest culprit, is the fear. Just to know in the back of your mind that now it's recorded, now it's purely me. Nobody's faking it, behind a post.
And it's amazing how daunting, or what that fear can be, because again, 25 years in radio broadcasting, fairly confident behind a microphone. Put me in front of a camera, especially back there was a brief stint in my career where I did live television, and occasionally we'd do like a telethon type thing. And they're live all the time. And there's this red light on the camera staring you in the eye. It's that one-eyed monster that's staring right at you. And you're going, so I can understand that fear, and that bright light, that's that red light, but then the other lights that are on you. It's not an environment we're used to. Does it deter executives in some cases from putting themselves forward because of the fear? Is that one of the reasons why they'll put somebody else out there that's maybe more confident?
Yes, but that's not the skill. That's not acquirable. It's an acquired skill to be comfortable on camera. And one advice that I normally give to people is, camera is a very intimate form of communication. If we think about the stage, right? We have live audience, you have to fill in the stage with your presence, you have to walk, you have to kind of pinpoint the people, make sure you make eye contact to a degree with people in the audience. With camera, when you think about it, people consume content most of the time on mobile, or on PCs, or wherever they consume the video content individually. They don't necessarily watch video content as a group of people. So it is very important to understand that it's actually just having a conversation. I'm just having a conversation with a camera, as if you were having a conversation with a person behind that camera. So just comprehending that this is actually a person, you just have to look all the time in the lens for the connection of the eye purposes, but it is a single person sort of model, again, because of how people consume video content. It's one-on-one. It's not groups and one.
And I love that example. It's one of the things that it's tough when you're starting out in broadcasting. You've been in broadcasting, I've been in broadcasting. You're speaking to that audience of one. So even when you're crafting your message, or even if the message has been crafted for you, you're still speaking to that one person. You need to connect with them as their one person. And the language is, so I quite often will, in my past life as a speaker trainer as well, now bringing that into the podcasting space, training people and giving them some instruction on when you're sharing your message. It's not, okay, everyone in YouTube land or in podcast land. It's more you and we and us, and, really bringing people in with the language, which again, it's mindset too. But to your point, it can be daunting. Okay, how do I do this thing? And the technology can be a bit of a fear factor too. I'm assuming that I know people, again, from the broadcasting space, in radio, you put a microphone in front of them, they'll talk about Blue Streak without a microphone in front of them. Put a microphone in front of them, even if they're being recorded, they shut up. I'm assuming it's the same with video.
Oh, is just tenfold more, because it has a face to it, right? To the voice.
There's a face.
No, it's not just the voice. There's also a face, added to it, and everything that comes with it, right? Like I said, I use a lot of hands in general, right? So I when I sometimes watch my videos back, I'm like, oh my God, I used to make hands, But then in the end, it's me. If I'm not me, then people will meet and be like, well, that's a different Loretta over here, We saw one on camera, but we're seeing a different one in person. And the goal is to translate that who you are, through the lens. And sometimes it is very challenging. I'm not saying it's easy, especially who are not trained to be on camera, who are afraid. It's not easy. You have to start slowly, step by step. Just try it out, get comfortable, record yourself, don't publish anything, test it out, hear your own voice, watch yourself back, see what works, what doesn't work, what you notice as tics, right? Yourself when you're in front of the camera, and only when you're comfortable, try to publish something, right? But I've seen a lot of videos with big flops and they generate a lot of views because it's real. It's not faked. Right. So it's real. And then people relate to realness. One of the things that I always say in my message, is that I look at everything from real relating lens perspective. That's kind of my method. How do we come across as real, relatable, and pull people in, through that perspective, right? Not everything has to be perfect. And trust me, I'm a perfectionist in general. When I decided to kind of up level myself as well through video content specifically, I was going all into preparation, setup, and making sure the light is good, making sure everything is perfect, because I'm showcasing my background, right? Even though tech part is not my strength, it's more communication, but I felt the pressure that I have to show the perfection, and it was a big roadblock to just progress and do something. So I nixed everything. I said, forget about it. People are forgiving. I have to be real. If I have a moment and I have an idea, I need to record it. I need it to be simple. I can't have this whole setup going on, and because then my inspiration will go away. So it's just find simple ways of doing it. You go on a walk, just record what you're seeing. Just purely record. Just talk to yourself. Nobody knows these days if you're talking to yourself or somebody on the phone.
It's true, actually.
Yeah, and just play it back for yourself to see how you sound, and then try to record the real message of what you want to share, with the audience. See how that comes across. Share it with others, your trusted, people in the circle. Not necessarily, family, because they will be nice, but share with people who are, in your professional contacts, right? Because they will be, more honest in how that comes across.
Great answers. And I love the piece where you said, play it back. So you see how you look and you hear how you sound. Those are two things that people hate. A lot of people hate seeing themselves on camera, and they hate how they sound. I'm like, but that's how you sound. Get used to it.
Yeah.
It's how you look. It's how you sound. You have to get used to it. You also said something very interesting, and I'm going to add a third R to it. You have to be relatable. You have to be real, and you have to be relevant.
Oh, yes. 100%. Mm-hmm.
You need to connect those three R's. If you don't, I'll add a third to that.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't need no royalties for it or rights or anything. It's my
I'll underwrite it. Carl Richards' idea.
But certainly, all of those things are very important when you're speaking on camera. I like that you encourage people to be a little bit casual to help them be comfortable. Personally, I do have a bit of a vendetta against people who do the walking and the recording, but that's another story altogether. But definitely, if you're practicing, by all means, practice whatever works. Practice whatever is helping you be comfortable getting on the camera. So you have that as a gauge to be able to say, okay, that's what I look like. That's what I sound like. What are the tics? What are the vocal issues that I have? What are the facial expressions that I should have that I don't have? Do I look deadpan? Do I look be smiling more? It's funny because I was playing back a video podcast, and when I get passionate, I get serious. I don't mean to get serious.
Yeah.
I know how to paint the smile on. I know you learn that in broadcasting, right? Paint the smile on, even if you're half asleep. Okay. But I was so serious about making some points about whatever I was talking about. And I'm playing back the reel that this podcaster created. And I'm like, oh, I should be smiling. I should be smiling. So I actually put that in the comment because he made a comment saying, oh, that was my favorite clip. It was great to have you on the show, Carl. And I said, it was great being your guest. I should be smiling. Because we don't know what we look like, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not only on the look of it as well, but it also changes a little bit of your vocal cords too, because when you smile, you come across a little bit more warm, right? And I get very passionate as well. When I believe in something, I get really just storming towards it, where people are like, whoa, what's going on here, Loretta? Back off. So I understand what you mean, when you're trying to prove a point, how you become this, more serious and more like a forthcoming, I guess, and it's not for everybody. But one thing that you said earlier, the walk and talk, right? The sort of the selfie walk and talk, right? Yes, you pointed a very great aspect of being professional, So it depends what your business is all about, where you reside in your career, where you are in this, when we call executive mode, right? Are you a small business, owner? Are you a corporation leader? Are you a founder? Are you a middle manager? Where do you reside? All of that shapes what your goals are in terms of why you want to use the video as part of your, I guess, authority building. Same as podcast authority building, right?
Yep.
And, what type of approach is suitable, for you, right? So yes, not everybody is good, and not everybody will come across authoritative if just, walk and talk, right?
Yep.
If you look at Gary Vee, that's how he started. Walk and talk. He sits in the car, he just blurts his ideas, and that's how you learn. But that's his style. This style is not for everybody. You can't imagine a C-suite executive, hopping off the plane and just like recording themselves like that.
But so many
it takes
people
also
do.
a certain personality. Yeah, it does take a certain personality, right?
Yeah.
So you have to match it to what's authentic to you. You can't just copy somebody else's mode and say, now I'm going to do the same thing, I'm going to replicate, it's going to work. No, it has to flow, it just has to flow what's natural to you.
To that point, though, so many people will do that. They'll say, hey, I saw Gary Vee do it. He's very successful at it. So I'm going to do the walk and talk. And they don't take into consideration, and this is why practice is good. Practice makes perfect. No, perfect practice makes perfect. A lot of people don't consider I'm walking by a stream, which has noise, or it's a windy day. There's a lot of noise. That ends up cutting out your voice. So those things. But to your point, it doesn't work for everybody. You have to find out what works for you, and don't just do it because somebody else is doing it. It doesn't bring about, or doesn't necessarily bring about, the best messaging for you. Just because it does for Gary Vee, by way of example, doesn't mean it will for you. But that's a very important piece, I think, to reemphasize, is that just because somebody else is doing it. It takes me back to when I was on the TEDx stage, and one of the talks that I gave, I was on the TEDx stage once as an MC and then as a speaker. The premise of the TEDx talk was, how many people try and emulate someone else? I want to be just like so-and-so. So therefore, I'm going to do all the things that they do. I'm going to walk like them, talk like them. I'm going to speak like them. I'm going to do all those things that they do, not realizing that it's not connecting the same way, because the only person who can speak like Loreta Tarozaite is Loreta Tarozaite. Carl Richards can't speak that way.
Exactly. You have to have a specific Lithuanian accent.
That too.
But, I have a perfect story to actually complement what you just said, and I did record one of my, sort of founder stories from my background in TV. In my very early career in television, so I started as an anchor in a small business show, TV show on the national television. Then I got recruited to be a host of a docuseries show on another national television station. And I had very big shoes to fill in, because the woman who pretty much was the brand of those docuseries, had decided to move on, pursue some other goals. And they're like, okay, well, maybe let's try Loretta put into that spot, So they recruited me. And I was, I don't know, maybe my probably first year in television to begin with. And in Lithuania, there was no such thing, or I didn't know that it existed, and it was not part of, journalism curriculum when I was studying, broadcast. There were no on-camera coaches. Nobody coached me how to be good on camera. I just happened to somehow be comfortable at it from the beginning. But when I was put into the shoes to fill somebody else's role, I thought I just have to be like her. So I did exactly what you just said. I was her. I was attempting to be her. How, like, my enunciations, I was mimicking. I was rewatching her videos. I'm like, okay, this is how she pronounced it, because she had such a massive audience, right? And I'm like, okay, we need to maintain the audience. So now they're transplanting me into this role. And I'm like, I'm failing miserably. The only advice the producer was giving during those insert recordings, into those docuseries shows, once in studio, just be yourself, just be yourself. I'm like, well, what the heck does that mean, be myself? Like, can you tell me what that means? Nobody ever told me. I ended up realizing I'm going to fail miserably. I'm going to ruin my reputation. I need to go back to the news. First of all, that's more my vibe, more my pace, and as you can tell, I speak fast, I move fast, Docuseries was a bit too slow. And I'm like, you know what? This is not for me. I'm not doing a good job. I just need to remove myself, from that environment. But I did everything wrong. And that's where I realized, how important it is to understand and uncover yourself. And I made it a mission for myself when I went back to the news, environment. It's like, I need to figure out what it is my style. And I was just testing it all out on myself. Nobody was telling me what to do. Here's a teleprompter. Okay, read it. Well, how do I read it? Let me play around and see how I should read it. It was a journey. And when I look back, I'm like, oh my God, it was so embarrassing. It's just embarrassing, everything that we go through in these early career stages,
It's phenomenal how we can still be alive based on some of the things that we've done.
On live television. And I was literally on live television. I'm like, oh my God, Oh, yeah.
Well, kudos to you for rising above it and carrying on, despite the fact that it wasn't exactly your best. But look at what you do now. You are the beacon of hope for people who need that training that didn't exist back then. You help people on that space. We've covered a lot of tips already today, but I wanted to ask if there were any other tips or tricks that you wanted to pass along that help execs be in that comfort place when they're on camera.
I think first and foremost, you have to realize if you have that drive, right? I mean, if you don't have the drive, if it's very forced, again, let's define executive. Sorry. I'm not talking about these C-level executives that have to go through that training, no matter what. Let's kind of knock it down a bit, by a layer, right? Just identify if this is even your medium, right? Because if you're forcing it, it's going to be a long path to success. If you realize, okay, yes, I want to master the video as part of communication, because we're on all these virtual meetings, I go and speak on stage, but I would love that speaking engagement to be recorded, right? I do have a lot of knowledge and I want to share it with the audiences online, right? So if that's the medium and that you want to master, just, go for it. But if it's not the medium, don't even attempt going there. Maybe writing is your medium. I know my medium is not writing. I like talking and recording a video. It's easier for me because I just speak. When I see at the blank sheet of paper, I blank out. I become the blank sheet of paper myself.
It remains blank. It just
yes, exactly.
It's blank. That's a good point, Loretta, that, really, is it for you? If not, find something that is. As you said, maybe it's writing. For me, it's mostly the audio platform. That's not to say I can't embrace video, because I can, and it's great that I can do that. But if it's not for you, don't feel pressured to do so.
Exactly.
This has been an amazing conversation. I could talk to you about this forever. I can't. That's a very long time. I don't think I have that much bandwidth on my computer, but I do want to give you the opportunity, though, if you have something to pass along to our listeners today, PDF, checklist, whatever it is that you'd like to share.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that opportunity, Carl. I appreciate that. Yes, people can go to my website, Loreta.today, and you will find there a checklist that you can download, presence checklist specifically. One of them, it's kind of has a twofold part. One is executive presence assessment, and another one is company presence assessment. It all weaves a lot of things into it, your communications aspect, branding aspect, everything, so you can kind of test yourself and see where you or your company stands when it comes to the score. And if you see any gaps, and you want to close them up, obviously I can help you out.
Phenomenal. This has been an amazing conversation today. Loreta Tarozaite, before I turn you loose to go help some executive in the world be more comfortable on camera, I'm going to give you the final thought.
Final thought is, if you pursue video, and if you're representing the company, right, or your business for that matter, or your startup, try to align your personal brand values with your company values. See how they match up, where they intersect, because you're going to be the face of the company in the end. So if you're representing your company, and when people engage with your company, with your teams, with everything, they have to feel that same culture from you throughout the organization. So that would be the best advice I guess I could give, just make sure that alignment exists.
That's a great place to leave it. Loreta Tarozaite, thanks so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me, Carl.
And thank you for joining us today. Special thanks to our producer and production lead, Dom Carrillo, our music guru, Nathan Simon, and the person who works the arms, all of our arms actually, my trusty assistant, Stephanie Gafour. If you like what you heard today, leave us a comment and a review, and be sure to share it with your friends. If you don't like what you heard, please share it with your enemies. Oh, and if you have a suggestion of someone who you think would make an amazing guest on the show, let us know about it. drop us an email. Ask Carl at carlspeaks.ca. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. You'll find all those links in the show notes. And if you're ready to take the plunge and join the over 3 million people who have said yes to podcasting, let's have a conversation. We'll show you the simplest way to get into the podcasting space because after all, we're Podcast Solutions Made Simple. We'll catch you next time.